This might be a bit of a scary story from here on. A colleague of mine is trying to break up with his girlfriend, whom he's been dating since high school. Recently, something happened. There's this girl who was also a classmate from high school, and in a common scenario, while listening to her love life troubles, she burst into tears. So he hugged her and stroked her head to comfort her. He says he already felt aroused at that time, but somehow managed to control his feelings and drove her home. She invited him to come in and stay for a while, but he knew he couldn't do that. They talked for a few minutes in front of her house. The atmosphere became a bit intimate, and despite knowing it was inappropriate, he couldn't resist the impulse and ended up kissing her. After this incident, my colleague, who had been living with his girlfriend and wasn't getting along well with her, realized he was starting to develop feelings for this other girl. It seems the girl in question is also beginning to have feelings for my colleague. When he consulted me about this, I advised him to meet up with his girlfriend once more before making a decision. That was a month ago. Shortly after, my colleague had to go away for work, and of course, he had made plans to meet with the girlfriend in question. That was just a week ago. Then, 3 days ago, he suddenly told me, "I broke up with my girlfriend." Even though I knew the answer, I couldn't bring myself to ask which one he meant. The conversation with my colleague continued. He said he brought up the breakup as soon as he returned. But hearing about his girlfriend's subsequent frenzied behavior made me a bit scared, even though it wasn't my business. The night he brought up the breakup, she apparently went on a rampage until nearly dawn. Also, while they were traveling together by car, she suddenly tried to jump out of the moving vehicle. He says she's calmed down quite a bit now, but since that day, every time they meet, she intensely blames him, and the stress from that has made it difficult for him to eat. They're supposed to move out of their current apartment and start living separately by the end of this month. But listening to the story, I can't shake off the worry that they might not make it until the end of the month. Hearing about her frenzied behavior, you'd think he'd hate going home. But my colleague doesn't stay at friends' houses and goes home every day. Apparently, his girlfriend also comes home every day. And at night, they sleep together with their futons laid out side by side, without any physical contact. As someone who has experienced a similar situation, would be too scared to want to go home. I hope the remaining few days until the end of the month pass safely. This is a story from my senior. It happened when he entered a certain mountain. They were almost at the village at the foot of the mountain, but since my seniors disliked populated areas, they decided to camp on the mountainside where they could see the village. They found 2 flat rocks of suitable size side by side and prepared dinner there. After finishing dinner, when they were about to sleep, they set up their tent between these rocks. Apparently, there was a mountain path like an animal trail next to the tent. In the middle of the night, when they woke up, they heard what sounded like voices approaching from down the mountain. As they were wondering what it could be, they then heard the sound of multiple monk staffs from up the mountain. Feeling that this was dangerous, they woke up their companions and trembled inside the tent. Lights like torches were closing in from both above and below the mountain. Just as they thought it was over, the tent window was suddenly opened. There was the face of an elderly man in his 60s. As they were startled, the man said, "What are you doing in a place like this?" It seems he was just an ordinary person. As they relaxed and came out, they saw a procession stopped in front. Everyone had a triangular paper called sanposhi on their foreheads and was wearing black clothes. As they wondered what this was, at the front of the procession, they saw a painted coffin called zaguri, which is no longer seen these days, hanging from poles carried by about 4 people. It was a midnight funeral procession. In that region, to avoid bad luck, they transport the deceased at night, and the funeral is held the next day. Moreover, it turned out there was a burial ground exclusively for earth burials beyond where my seniors were sleeping. The place where my seniors were sleeping was, in a sense, the boundary between this world and the next. The coffin was carried by just a few people, taken to the burial ground, and buried. My seniors had no choice but to sleep in the village at the foot of the mountain. When they asked the villagers about the sound of the monk staffs they heard from up the mountain, they were told that, my friend, was the welcoming from the other world. If we had been a little later. The next day, my seniors apologized at the shrine of the village's guardian deity before leaving. I wasn't told where this was, but I wonder if such practices still remain. I've omitted some details to keep the story from getting too long. Apparently, it was a small village on a small piece of land in the mountains, and to prevent the burial ground from filling up, they kept the earth burial site separate from the cemetery with gravestones. My seniors were told that in the actual burial place, they dig up old graves and put the bones found in the soil into small boxes, which are then buried under the new coffin. The flat rocks where my seniors prepared and ate dinner were just the right size to place a zaguri coffin. The lower rock represented this world, and the upper rock the next world. Relatives would move the coffin from the lower rock to the upper rock for a final farewell. After that, only selected relatives would carry it to the grave. In other words, the place where my seniors were was the boundary between this world and the next. In a sense, it was said to be scarier than the burial ground itself.